Okay, we've got the wings are covered now. We're through the final shrink on the top and bottom. So what we'll do is go ahead and lay out our marks for the rib stitch. So one thing that's different about the Sturt system, see we've got the fabric shrunk, and we're going to be working with just the bare fabric. Most of your solvent systems, at this point, a seal coat would be brushed on the fabric. And that happens with this system after everything is done. So it makes it very nice when we lay our tapes and so forth. It's very easy to get rid of all the glue lines and brush marks. What we need to do now is lay out the rib stitching. And for stitching on the wing, normally the first stitch wants to start back about 1 inch past the end of at the front of the leading edge, which is about right here. And then the stitch spacing itself is dependent upon the maximum allowable airspeed on the aircraft. Anything under 170 is a 3.5 inch spacing. So what we'll be looking at is a 3.5 inch space on these top of these ribs. Now when we transfer these through to the bottom side, because the distance from one end of the rib to the other is a little shorter, this spacing has got to be shortened up a little bit. If you don't, your stitches will gradually start running off crooked because the spacing is not accurate, because you've got a shorter distance. You're going to be further down the bottom than you are on the top. So you set the maximum spacing on the top of the rib, and when we transfer through to the bottom, your spacing is going to be slightly shorter. So we'll talk about that in just a minute here. What we're going to do right now is come to the end of right here, we're going to mark both ends. I've got my old piece of aluminum strip here. Again, you can do this with a chalk line, or you can mark each individual rib. But what we're going to do here is go ahead and mark across the nose rib. So I like to put a mark like this across here, because what it does now, when we start to actually do our rib stitching, after we put our reinforcing tape down, the tape's going to lay across the top of that, and we've got a real nice accurate mark here to punch our needle through. It always looks a lot nicer if your stitches are nice and perpendicular there to that rib. You don't really want stitches running off crooked at different angles. It definitely will show through your tape. Nice straight edges are very important. Also, the spacing should be uniform right straight down the line. When you look down the wing, all of these stitches should fall in a very nice straight and uniform length. Okay, another thing we have to consider here, we started laying out our stitches on the top side, but because of the offset here of the false spar, see the distance is different between here and here. We need to find what that difference is, so we know where the stitches will have to stop on the top. We can't stitch up here and come on through and hit this. Now if we take our tape here on the bottom of the square, take a look, we find that 3.5 inches from this lip down will put us about right here, which is just fine. The stitch could go there if necessary. We're going to go around the other side of the wing here, and we're going to come down our 3.5 inches and just put us a reference mark here. Now when we start laying out our stitch pattern across, we're going to find that this is going to be too far back. So our stitch is going to end about right here, which is going to be satisfactory. This is our target. We cannot go further aft than this point here because of the concave, the offset of the false spar. So we'll go ahead and lay the wing back down now, lay our straight edge up, and mark all these top ribs. Okay, we're laying out our marking for the top rib spacing. Again, I use this long piece of aluminum. A lot of folks will actually use a chalk line and snap the line. I don't care to do that myself. I don't like to get the chalk all over the fabric. This is nice long straight edge. If you don't have one, you can mark these with and use a yardstick or whatever. But this long strip here works really good. Another thing you might notice, I mentioned when you do the fabric, if you iron over the ribs before you start center bays, you can see there's very little sag between these rib bays. Even if we scoot this up toward the nose ribs, again, the sag is pretty minimal between the ribs. You don't have a lot of recessed areas there. So it makes a real nice top surface for the wing. Again, we just line up our straight edge here. And like I say, I like to put the pencil marks like this. What it does is give me a nice straight line to go ahead and... Okay, we've marked our rib stitch spacing on the top of the wing. We're on the bottom. On the Piper here, this leading edge wrap is the same top and bottom. So we use the same reference. We're going to come back 1 inch. Now we're going to go to the other end of the wing. We're going to come back 1 inch. Right here. Okay. Now we're going to go ahead and take our tape. In fact, what we got to do now is get the length of this rib. Yeah, what we're looking at here is about 935 millimeter. Okay. And we had 11 stitches on the other side. So if we take our 935 millimeter and divide that by 11, we come up with the wrong answer. No, we don't. 85, what we got is the spacing between our stitches is going to be 85 millimeter on this. On the other side, 3.5 inches, if you look at the tape here, is actually 89 millimeter. So we're about 4 millimeters less on each stitch for these to maintain a straight pattern. And lay this out, and then we'll go ahead then and do the same thing we did on the bottom. We'll take our straight edge and we'll go ahead and mark it out. And if we look at this, again, here's our inch side, here's our millimeter side, and 85 millimeters is right here. And transpose that across, what we've got is about 3 3/8 inches. It's a whole lot easier to figure the millimeters than it is the inches because we work with whole numbers all the time. What you do is lay your bias tape, or the stretchy elastic tape, on that bottom rib and cut it to the exact length of the rib that you're going to be using. Mark it, bring it up to the top rib, and then stretch it to the length of this rib. Mark your rib spacing, 3.5 inches, 3 inches, 1.5 inches, whatever they need to be, on that bias tape. And then when you relax it and lay it back on the bottom of the rib, all of that stitch spacing is closed up, and that gives you the exact spacing for on the bottom. That's an alternative method. Again, you put the tape on the bottom, get the length, bring it up to the top, stretch it to the length of the rib, mark all the rib spacings on it, and then when it comes back to the natural length of the bottom rib, when you lay it on, you've got all the marked spacings, and that works out real good too. Personally, I always use the system millimeters. You don't have to work the fractions of an inch. So we'll have to turn the wing over, measure 1 inch back from the leading edge, and then go ahead and see what our actual spacing will be for the bottom. So for right now though, we know we're going to go 3.5 inches, and we'll go ahead and lay the top out. It should take roughly just a fraction, about 11 stitches here. Another thing you consider when you're within the propeller arc plus 1 rib out, everything has to be done at a lesser angle. If you look at 4313, in this airplane, it specifies about a 2.25 inch wide spacing. It makes it look much nicer. It's much easier to lay it out if you just go to half spacing. So where we got 3.5 inches here, and we can see on the tape here, we can go to half of that. So we've got 1.75 inches. So the spacing from here inboard will be 1.75 inches. The beauty of doing that, instead of having a 2.25 inch, is that you maintain a very uniform rib spacing. It takes a couple more stitches per rib, but it comes up with a much nicer looking finish, and again, you've got a very uniform pattern, and that's what people are going to see when it's done. And what we're doing here, we've got our straight edge, we've got our half spacing marked on the 2 outboard ribs. Yeah, I just use a yardstick on this right here and just pencil mark across each rib. And that'll give us our target when we do the rib stitch. So we'll get into that here a little later. Okay, we've got our stitches all marked off. What we're going to do now is we're going to lay the reinforcing tape. What this is just a cloth tape. It's got a self-adhesive on the back of it. Sticks down. These ribs are about a 1/2 inch wide, so consequently we're using 1/2 inch reinforcing tape. The purpose of this tape is when your stitch comes across, it has a reinforcement here that it pulls through and spreads this load out across the fabric, rather than just going directly through the bare fabric, which could possibly have a tendency to tear out. This greatly enhances the strength of the fabric along the stitch line here. Again, this comes in different widths, a 1/2, 3/8, and 1/4. Most of your ribs take the 1/2 inch tape. Again, it's like anything, when you lay it, you want to try to get it nice and straight if you can, and keep it centered over the rib. This is normally, these should extend a minimum of a 1/2 inch past the end of the stitch. So if you're doing individual stitches, like on a little dollar patch, and that's the case where on a tail surface or whatever, you might have a rib stitch here, and a rib stitch here, and a rib stitch here, you'd put a 1 inch long piece of tape and then stitch across that. So you'd have your 1/2 inch of tape across each end. In this case here, where we're doing a complete rib stitch on a rib, this tape will lay down the entire length of the rib. Again, try to center it right over the rib. Continue all the way down. Bring it down. We're going to cut this off right about the edge of the leading edge here. As you can see here, where we put our marks, they extend past the edge of the reinforcing tape. Makes it real easy to have the mark for the rib stitch cord. Okay, we've gone ahead, we've marked all of our rib stitch spacing. We've got a reinforcing tape down. We showed a little bit of that initially. Those are all in place. What I've done now is I've tied the aileron cables together. And the purpose for that is you got to be very careful when you rib stitch through the area where the cables run. As I can tell you from experience, if you don't pay attention and you get your stitches done and those cables are hanging slack in there, you're going to be cutting it out and redoing it. So what we do is I tie the ends. I've got a string tied to the end of the cables. They terminate about here in the wing. I pull a lot of tension on those to hold them nice and straight. Now when we start doing the rib stitching, we'll shine a light through the fabric and make sure that the stitch is going to clear. If there's an area where it doesn't want to clear, what you can do then is go ahead and do a half stitch just around the rib there, and then come back and do a stitch on the opposite side, and then continue with your normal rib stitching. I've shined the light in here. A couple of these are going to be pretty close. We'll have to see what we get when we run the needle through it. The main thing I'm trying to stress though is that before you start the rib stitching, make sure you know where your cables are at. These Pipers have got a very short run of cable through here, so there's not a lot to contend with. Some of your Aeroncas and other aircraft have very long cable runs down through the wing. You can get a lot of cable slag or a lot of sag in the cables, and like I say, if you don't pay attention, you do all your rib stitching, if that cable's laying through the wing like this, you're going to find that you have made a real mess for yourself. You're going to have to cut a bunch of stitches out, and you'll only do that one time. You don't forget after the first time. Okay, we've tended to the cables there. What I always do before I actually start the rib stitch, I take a lead pencil and I actually go down and I pre-punch the rib stitch holes. This does a couple things. It leaves a nice black hole. It's easy to see. When you pass the needle through, it's a lot easier for the point of that needle to hit that hole and find it than it is scooting around and trying to hit just a piece of fabric like that. Another thing, the point of that pencil is fairly blunt. And what it's doing, we're not really cutting or tearing the fabric when we perforate the hole. Primarily, it's just spreading the weaves apart. And you'll find, after you do this, a lot of times you'll come back, you're going to find these holes have actually closed up a considerable amount. So I always carry a pencil with me when I start rib stitching. If I have to, I'll come back and I'll open these holes up a little bit. And again, it just makes the stitching go a little easier. It's a lot easier to find the hole on the opposite side if it's already pre-punched. Also, you've got a clean hole you're going through, and you're not going to start pulling puckers and stuff in it where you just pass the needle through the bare fabric. So again, I prefer to pre-punch them. The side that the knot pulls down through, you might find you want to go through and open them up and make them just a little larger. Okay, we're ready to start rib stitching. First thing you're going to need for that is a needle. This particular needle here, I made that from a piece of 1/8 inch brass welding rod. One thing about it, you can see it's got a curved tip on it. The tip's very important. Occasionally you have things you have to work around. It's primarily important here though, because in the hidden knot you have to pass that needle up under the fabric and bring it up through the next hole. Without a curved tip on this needle, you can't do that. Secondly, to make this, you just lay it on an anvil and flatten it out with a hammer. Then take a drill bit of about a 1/16 inch or slightly larger and bore you a hole in it. Another thing that's very important is on the tip of the needle, you don't want a real sharp point. This is a blunt rounded point. It wants to be able to scoot around the fabric without causing any damage to it. When you pass that through and you're trying to find the hole, that needle is going to be scooting around, and if it's a sharp point, you're going to start cutting the fabric and really weaken it around that area. The commercial ones you buy, most of them are stainless steel. They have a needle sharp point on them. They're extremely stiff, very hard to bend, and for my part, you're much better off just go down and get a piece of 1/8 inch brass welding rod and make you a needle. The length of it depends on how thick the wing is. I'd make it about at least 3 or 4 inches longer than what the thickness of the thickest part of the wing is. To start the rib stitching on this, you have to first thread the string in it. This string is about almost twice the wingspan here to have enough to work with. I'd rather have excess and not quite enough. Now to start this stitch, the initial stitch is actually a double wrap. We're going to pass this needle through to the other side of the wing, and we're going to start the stitch from that side. I'll pass it back through, and there'll be a square knot on that side. The two pieces of string are passed back, and then we'll tie them here, lock them with a half hitch, and then start the actual run with the rib stitch with the modified seine knot. So we'll pass the needle to the other side. It's going to get passed through to me here. Okay, we passed the needle's been passed through from this side to the bottom side of the wing, back up the top. What we need to do now is leave enough string here so we have enough to pass through to the other side and still be able to tie a knot. So that's plenty long enough. What we're going to do here is just tie a square knot. Square knot, we went across, we come over this string, just make a double little loop out of it there. You can see that square knot laying in there. Snug it down, roll that knot over to the side. What we'll do now is thread the needle back on, and both of these strings will be passed through to the other side, and then we'll actually start our rib stitching. Okay, we've passed our string back through. You can see the original loop here, and we did our half hitch on the other side of the wing. What we're going to do now is go ahead and tie a square knot here. The only thing different on this side is that we're going to lock this square knot with a half hitch. We don't slip. Got the knot. We're going to stick the needle right through here just to give us a little relief. We can pass this loose string here right beside the needle, pull it through, do us a half hitch here. Loop around our needle, push it on through, and we'll tie this other half of the square knot off. Okay, we're finishing off the second half of the half hitch here. Had to do a little pause momentarily. I got this string caught in the half hitch. We'll pull this over. We want to roll this knot underneath. What we'll do now, we'll go ahead and cut the tail off of this string. Make sure you don't cut the wrong one, or you get to do it all over again. And again, we've got the knot fairly close to the end there. So what we're going to do is just work it on over, take the end of our needle, and push that knot right down through the hole. And then we push the little tail in there with it. There we go. Now, we'll actually start our rib stitch with the modified seine knot here. We pass the needle underneath, come up through the next hole, pull all the slack. When you're pulling this slack, you want to be very careful that you don't get this string that's coming through here caught on something, because if you do, and you're pulling this aggressively, you're going to rip that fabric and it'll cut from one hole to the other. If you do that, you're going to have to repair it with a baseball stitch, and it's not really a good plan. Be very careful when you're pulling the string through. Now we're going to hold this string. This is the one that comes to the previous hole, up through the new hole. Now we've got it. The needle's going to pass through. Go to the opposite side.
Okay.
There, we got it. It's really helpful to have two people doing this. Up a little bit, down a little, right there. Okay, we're going to pull the string back through. You can see this is the string that came from the previous knot. It lays over the top of our string here. We pull this surplus through. You can see now we have a nice little loop that the string passes through the center. This string is the one that you control your knot with. You take that with your left hand, you hold that. Now we won't turn loose of that. We got our loop laying here. Now to start the knot, pass the needle under the bottom of the loop, over the top of the top half of the loop. So we go under the loop, over the loop, hook the point, pull that top part of the loop straight down. You can see it forms a little curly Q. And now we roll the needle over the top of this left side of the string, pass it up the rib underneath this center loop here, and then across the top of the string you've been holding with your left hand. Once you've got that, you get untangled here. Go ahead and start pulling all the slack through. Again, we're not turning loose of this string with our left hand. This is the one again that came up through the hole here. We hold that with our left hand. Our right hand is strictly taking all the slack. As we pull this, we keep pulling slack and this little loop gets bigger. Our right hand just keeps pulling that out so we don't have a lot of loose string. You just pull a little tension with your left hand, keeps pulling this string that's wrapped through the knot. As you do that, the string keeps sliding. As you work sideways, see the knot slid over right to the edge of the rib. Hold it with your right hand now, pull, and there's the knot. Now, to go on to the next one, we'll push it under slightly, come up with the needle to the next hole. And again, be careful when you're pulling this through. If you get it caught, you're pulling hard, you're going to rip the fabric. Pass the needle, hold that string, keep control of it. Pass the needle through to the other side. Right there. Okay. Do another knot here. Again, we pull the string through. See the loop coming around. We hold our string that has passed back through to you. Hold that with your left hand. This is the run that came from the other rib. Make sure that passes is the top half of your loop here. We go under the bottom, go over the top of that loop, pull it down through, cross the needle over, under the loop there, and across the string, pull the slack out of it. Again, we don't turn loose of this string with our left hand. Now we pull the slack with the left hand, pull a little bit with the right hand. You never pull tension with this. All we're doing is just slowly pulling this loop through. With the left hand again, you just pull and work sideways, and see the knot rolls right over to the edge. It's in place. It'll actually hold itself. Put your finger over it, pull, and you've got the knots in place and it's locked. Another thing you don't want to do just start pulling this really tight. If you over tighten these, you can actually start to crush the rib, and you'll get ribs instead of a nice curve to them. Cross top, you're going to find you've got divots in them, and that's because this rib stitching here has been pulled way too tight. Just need them snug. You don't need to tighten them up really super tight. Okay, pulling the needle through. Same thing we've had before. We've got our loop. Spring at the top. Pass the needle through, pull it under, roll it over, pass it under, roll it over. And we pull with our left hand, take slack with our right hand. Just roll the knot in, pull the slack out. Only difference now from what we've been doing is that we're going to finish this knot off with a half hitch. So you just pull it through there. That locks the knot off. Go ahead then, we cut the tail of the tape or the stitch off. Take the back side of the your needle here. Just push that right down through the hole. That gets rid of it. There, about got him. There we go. Makes a real nice rib stitch. And it's going to look the same on both sides. Got just a nice lay of stitch across. Normally before I tape, I always come back and I just kind of rub the tapes a little bit, and it just flattens them off. Just makes them lay down just that much tighter. And they're not hardly visible at all through the finished tape when you're done. Okay, we've demonstrated the rib stitching. What we're in the process of doing now is preparing the surface for our to lay our surface tapes. What I like to do to ensure they have nice, pretty straight tape lines is actually go ahead and mark where the tapes are going to lay. Here's some areas on the top of the wing where you can see where we've actually marked. I use a 2-inch, this happens to be an old Venetian blind, works very well. You can actually just pull a piece of tape and mark it at both ends, and then pencil mark both sides for reference lines. The main thing is that we want to be able to lay out real nice, pretty straight tape lines. If the rib is slightly crooked under the tape, you're much better off to maintain a straight line with the tape, because that's what your eyes are going to go to. A little bit of slight curves on the ribs are not going to really show through the tape. The crooked tape is very, very obvious, so it's important you get these straight. What I do, I've got a center mark on this 2-inch wide piece of blind, and what I do, I'll just lay that on the center of the rib, make me a reference mark, and of course I've got the other half here where I'd already started, so I just lay that blind down into place. And again, this is just strictly a reference, not real critical, but it gives you a target to shoot to when you're doing the when you're actually laying your tapes down. The top surface is the most difficult one to mark because, of course, the rib is curved. Now you can see we've got our tape line finished here. It's nice and straight. And so we'll go ahead and continue marking these. Once all the ribs lines are marked, also you can take this same piece of blind, because all the ends will be finished with the tape. And again, we can lay it down and mark our reference for our surface tape here. And again, once these tapes are laid, we'll lay the finished tape. The edges of all the surfaces should be reinforced with a piece of surface tape. In this case, we're going to use 2-inch. Here's a rib that ends at a junction point here. What we'll do then is extend that tape on up to this point right here, and then our cover tape will go ahead and overlap that to finish and tie the ends together. So we'll go ahead and finish marking this out, then we'll come back. Okay, we've marked off our tape lines here. What we've got is our fabric tape. What I like to do is take all of my tapes and I pre-cut them, and I leave the tail on, leave them a little long. And we're going to try to, on these, what I like to do is start my tape run right at the edge of the junction of the leading edge. That puts this end of the tape at the center of our finished tape. It makes a real nice looking finish. And very easy with this system, get every one of these started at the same spot. So what I'll do here, I pre-cut all the tapes. Go ahead and demonstrate the gluing procedure for this. what we've got is a small pot of glue here. And on this I'll use a 2-inch brush. You're going to see that the procedure for this is a little different than what we used before. Gluing fabric to fabric, we'll go ahead and glue directly into the wet glue. There's good pre-adhesion to this. The main thing is get this tape laid real straight on your reference mark. Lay it into the wet glue, brush down through it. You want to get a nice uniform change of color. If you need to, you can dip your brush and get just a little more glue if necessary. Now, this stage, so we don't have any glue line showing, same procedure again. Just going to wipe the surplus glue off of here. Main thing is don't have any wet, slick, shiny areas, because that's an area of a glue ridge that's been developed that'll tend to show through your finish. Now what we'll do here now is we're going to pre-glue each tape anywhere from about a 2 to 3 inch glue seam all the way down the wing. By the time we get to the last tape, this one will be tacked off to the point that we can start to handle it and it won't move. So we'll get our next tape in line here. Again, I pre-cut all of these. We'll pre-glue a short area. Lay the tape into it, make sure the tape is nice and straight on our tape line. Brush down through it, make sure you get these edges well glued. Don't worry about getting out past the edge of the tape a little bit. Because again, while it's aggressively wet, we'll take our paper towel and we just wipe the surplus glue off. Okay, we've got the nose of all of the tapes are glued down, they're pre-glued in place. And the beauty of this is that we can do this in stages. As you can see, we can actually work this. The elapsed time from when we stopped taping here has been about 5 minutes or 6 minutes maybe at the most. So you see this tacks up fairly fast. We can handle the tape. So to demonstrate actually gluing the tape, I'm going to start with one of these short ones here. It'll go just a little quicker. And we'll give you the gluing techniques for this. Again, we pre-glued that, so what we want to do is, you can see that's aggressively stuck. We're going to just ease that back a little bit, make sure we're glued up tight underneath there. And we're going to brush glue down here for about a foot or so. That's far enough. Just want a nice wet coat. Lay the tape down into that. Again, we brush down through it. And I want that not sopping wet, but I want to make sure that we've totally penetrated the pores of that tape. And again, a little spoilage out on the edges are not going to hurt a thing. Just wipe the surplus off of there. It doesn't have to be wiped a lot. Main thing, make sure there's not any wet, shiny areas left that are going to show through. And then we just continue like this right on down the wing. Again, you don't have to really rush. At this stage right here, if the phone rings, you really don't want to stop to answer it. You need to tend to this glue while it's wet. Once you've wiped it off, you can treat it like we did these pieces up here. You can actually stop, tend to something else. If you have a phone call or have to leave the project for a while, you can do that, come back later and continue on, and it'll never show through where you stopped and restarted. Now, we're getting close to the end here. There's two options. If you want to stop your tape line right along here, for instance, what you do is stop gluing about right here. And then come back after this glue's set. When you get to the end, you can come back. Then you can pencil mark this, lift it up, cut it off, and finish glue. This particular wing, we're going to run these tapes all the way to the end. But I'll go ahead and demonstrate that method on this where we can come back and show the finish. I'm going to actually stop gluing about right here. and we'll come back in a few minutes and demonstrate how I would actually finish that off. Okay, again, we just wipe the surplus off. Want a nice uniform color on the tape. Now, what makes this very nice, especially on a top surface like this, take the tail of your tape, put some masking tape on it, and now, because that glue's still wet, just very slightly pull this tape. Bring it around, stick it. Now what we've done, because this glue is still wet and that tape can slip in it, pulling that little amount of tension causes this thing to follow the concave curves of this fabric coming off the rib, and we get a real nice tight lay all the way down the surface of that rib. Now again, we're going to do what we did on the nose. We're going to continue right on down the wing and finish taping these. Okay, there's one other area here we'll talk about on the tapes, and this is in fact a couple spots here, the areas that you want to kind of watch for, is that when you're laying your tapes, you've got multiple tape runs, and you can get in issues like, here's going to be a finished tape comes across this trailing edge here, and really the end of that tape preferably won't lay on top of this rib run. That tape will come and end right here. So what you'd have is the tape stopping here, and then this tape is going to come across the top and finish this end. It's real easy to forget that if you don't pay attention. That's one nice thing about pre-marking these areas. It kind of flags these spots for you. Another example is right here is the edge of the trailing edge material. It really needs a tape to finish that off. This tape should be laid before these two tapes here are laid. Now and again, that tape, ideally what I do is lay it right to the edge of the reinforcing tape, and you really don't see that seam. On this other end, it's up to you. Personally, I would run this one right to the end and then let the tape finish it. Now, if you find yourself, you're gluing the tape down and all of a sudden you get here and think, holy cow, I really should have done this one first. Again, just stop. Just get a nice finished glue line, quit gluing, go ahead and pull the tape, just if it's on a top surface like this, like we described, to make it fit nice and tight. Let that go ahead and tack down good. You can flip it back out of the way later, go ahead and glue this and then finish gluing it, and it'll never show that you started and stopped. So it's another real advantage with this, is that it gives you a lot of leeway on things. So again, just areas here that you want to kind of pay attention to. A lot of times if I have a lot of these junctions, what I'll do is on this rib somewhere, I'll put an X, and that flags me that, hey, there's something going on here I need to pay attention to. And a lot of times I won't even start to glue these until I get this in place, or like I said before, you can glue it down and stop somewhere in this area, come back later, pull it up, and finish gluing. And again, where you stopped and started is not going to show through the finished product. Okay, we've demonstrated a little bit of the taping here. The one tape, if you recall, I stopped gluing before we got to the end of the wing here, and so I could demonstrate how we would terminate this tape at a specific location and then finish gluing. If, for example, if this tape was going to end right at the edge of this trailing edge, we could take our pencil mark exactly where we want that, or in this case it's actually going to end right here. That's where I'll actually end this tape. Since this is glued and it's stuck down, that's had a chance to tack up. See, it's very easy now to lift this. If we wanted this tape to end here, we take our pinking shears and cut the tape off right here, brush some glue under here, lay it into place, wipe it off, and you got a perfect end. Every one of those are going to end exactly where you want them to end. In this case, we're going to let it end right here. So what I'll do for demonstration purposes here, we're going to go ahead and take the pinking shears and just cut that, and you can see we get the nice tape lay right at the end. Reality on something like this, you can glue right to the end, tape it, pull it up later, and just cut it with a razor, because that edge is never going to show under your tape. So that is a procedure you can use if you want to have a particular ending spot that's somewhere up into the wing Again, stop gluing a little early. Lift while it's still taped in place. Pencil mark it. Lift it up, cut it. And then again, to finish gluing it, very simple process. Pour glue up into the edge of that joint. Brush it out. Brush down through it. And again, we just take our paper towel, wipe the surplus off, and there you have it. Now, these little edges like this, after the glue is dry, you can actually take your iron and just iron it, and those will lay right down, they disappear. Again, where I end at the edge like this, I do like I did on this rib right here. This has actually been, I did that a little earlier, and at a point like that, you can actually take your razor and just trim that off, and that'll finish it off, and that'll never show under the tape. Okay, we're just about to finish up the tapes on this wing. I've started laying the tape, our 4-inch finish tape, on the overlap on the leading edge. What I did, I went at the point of the seam where we previously pencil marked at. This is the overlap from the top fabric. Went ahead and marked up 2 inches from that. That actually is my glue reference line. I'm using a 2-inch brush, so it makes it real easy to come past that to glue on the bottom surface. So what we're doing, remember we mentioned before that we want a 3-inch on our overlap, and then we finish that with a 4-inch tape. It's real easy to do with this glue, because again, fabric to fabric, we have a good wet tacky adhesion with this. We just brush a good wet coat into here. Come to the edge of the seam, brush another nice wet coat down here on the fabric, and then we just take our 4-inch panel of fabric here, which I previously cut to rough length, lay it to the edge of our pencil mark, because again, that's our reference to keep this tape nice and straight. And then again, makes it really nice, because this glue doesn't flash off real fast. Being a water-based type glue, you don't get a surface flash on it like you do a lot of the solvents. And we can just brush that fabric right down into that wet glue. If it looks like it's a little dry, you can dip just a little more glue if you need to. Make sure the edges have plenty of glue on them. Once you get it to that point, and here you can see some foam on the brush right in here. That's real common with the water product. What we do, I keep an extra bottle here, and I just wipe that foam off. Keeps that brush nice and clean, and I don't contaminate my fresh glue with the air. So while that's still nice and wet here, we just go ahead like we've done with all the other joints, just wipe that surface residual glue off of there so it doesn't show through our finish. You can see there, got a nice tight bond to that. I could stop right here, come back later, go ahead and peel this fabric back and continue gluing at that point right there, and the glue line won't show because you brush the glue up nice and tight to the edge. Okay, now what we're going to show is we're going to get ready to put our perimeter tape on around the wingtip area. Notice we've got our tapes laid. Right now, I'm just going to trim off this previously laid piece of tape. These areas like this, you really don't need to pink these edges if you don't want to. Once it's trimmed, I like to take my hot iron and just lightly iron that into place. You can see that seam pretty well disappears. Also, when you lay a tape, it's nice to go ahead and iron the edges of your tape. That gets those tape edges to lay down nice and tight, and you don't show any, the tape edges will show through the finish much less than if you just leave a rough surface there. Okay. Now to get ready to put the tape on, what we're going to do is just brush the coat of glue right on the perimeter. We don't need a lot of it, 1/4 of an inch or 1/2 inch, 3/8, whatever. Main thing, just leave a wet coat, but make sure it's not so heavy that it tries to run and puddle. Okay, we've got most of our tapes laid now. So we described earlier, we went ahead and pre-glued around the wingtip area here, just around the outer radius of the tube. What we're going to do now is demonstrate how to lay the finish tape on that. So what we've done, I pre-cut this as a 3-inch non-bias tape, standard weight tape here. And we're going to go ahead and fold a center crease in this. And that's strictly to give us a reference for where the center of this 3-inch tape is at. Again, this is a non-bias tape. We're going to show how to form it around the curve. Makes a very nice fit. Just any nice rounded surface like this trailing edge works real good for putting a crease in this. Doesn't have to be a heavy one, just something to give you a reference for the center line of the tape. Now, you see the crease? The crease will always go with the sharp part of the crease down to the work. That way it helps to eliminate that showing through in the future. Also, I cut my tape a little long. I'm going to stick a little excess past here where the nav light goes. And what we'll do is get our center crease again for a point of reference. And we're going to lay that into that pre-glued wingtip area. And I put just a very slight amount of tension on that just to keep the wrinkles out. It's the only thing we're doing. We're not trying to stretch it to form the shape around the wingtip here. This is a real gentle curve on this, so it's relatively easy to do. And this method can be used around some real sharp curves too. Okay, that's got us laid out here. You can see it's lightly tacked into place. Just the pressure of our hand rubbing on that is all it took to tack it down. Now we're going to take our heat iron. So we've got that where we want it. What we want to do now is firmly attach that into that dried glue. So we use the heated iron to do that. Notice I keep the tape pulled away so the edges of the tape don't get into the hot iron here. This iron is right at 300 degrees right now because that tubing is a real effective heat sink, and we're only heating a real small area of this tape right at the moment. Again, we keep it pushed away from the iron. And what this does, this firmly attaches this piece of tape into that dried glue. So what we've done now, we've actually formed somewhat of a clamp, letting the glue clamp the fabric into place. Now, as you see here, we can actually pull that and stretch that slightly right down into that area there. So what we want to do now is go ahead and we're going to utilize the iron to start slowly shrinking this tape so it'll fit the contour around the radius of this wingtip. Notice I'm putting very light pressure, moving iron fairly fast. I want just a very, very light shrink on this. And we primarily want to let it start shrinking this outer radius. That's the area there that really has to narrow up to make this fit. Now there's a little bit of glue I put into there earlier. See, once I get this tape starting to lay where I want it, I can use a little bit of heat and actually get that start to thermally bond into the area here on this compound curve. Once we get that, we're going to just take off here, use just enough heat to get this tape to shrink into the radius that we need. And now we've got it lightly tacked. I'm going to just let the iron start to shrink the piece. An idea here, whatever temperature we need to shrink this radius is what everything will be ironed to. And what that does then is give us a very uniform width on our tape edge around this seam. Okay, we've turned the wing over on the rotator, and we've already shrunk the bottom side of this finished tape around the wingtip radius. What we're going to do is just take our iron here. We're going to repeat the same process here on the top. I'm going to kind of start here and just kind of work this over a little bit. Just kind of make sure that we don't have any little wrinkles that are stuck along the edge here. Just make sure that it's kind of all the fabrics push the direction we're wanting to go with it. And again, this is pretty shallow radius, so we can kind of start right in here, and we'll just start our shrink running here. Again, the bulk of the shrink wants to be, we'll just iron that down a little bit. And our next piece of fabric will come up and it's going to overlap this a little bit. Because I do this in 2 halves because of the junction here. It's very difficult to do with one piece. I do it in 2 halves. I like to do the rear half first. That way the overlap flows with the airstream across the wing. Okay, that's about all there is to this. We'll go ahead and finish gluing this side, then we'll turn the wing over. And then we'll go ahead and demonstrate putting the tape on the front half of the leading edge. Radius is a little bit tighter, so you're going to see it's the same procedure. Works equally well. Okay, because these tapes have a slight pre-coating on them, the glue doesn't brush down through them real well. So what we like to do is just lift the edge of the tape a little bit, brush glue down underneath where the tape's going to lay, then we'll come back and just brush some glue right down into the tape. We are brushing glue through there, but it doesn't brush through near as good as it does on just bare fabric. We're going to use the same procedure here. I have a little surplus, so I got a little wrap around the nav light area there. We get this fairly well centered on the leading edge here, leading edge, the wingtip radius here on the wingtip bow. And this is a Piper Colt until the wing is not quite what Piper did originally. This is been modified, has a Stuart wingtip on it. So it's a little different shape than original. It's a wingtip that really enhances the performance of these little short wing Pipers. Increases quite a bit of effective lift out here through the wingtip, very low drag, and does a very nice job of increasing the overall performance of these aircraft. Okay, we've got that stuck in place. We use the same technique again. Take our hot iron. You can see we're getting a bonded area around the edge. Main thing we want to do is lock this into place so it can't move around on us. Let that tape shrink enough to just fit the contour. There you can see we've got that now. Looks really nice. Again, this will push right down into place here. Okay, the tapes are all laid, and one of the last things we do is that we'll take the iron and we'll come along, we're going to iron all the tape edges. It's just a characteristic of pinked edge tape. Once they're glued, seem like the edges always try to fuzz just a little bit. You have kind of a rough sawtooth finish there because this is a thermally activated glue. Very easy to take the iron, set about 250 degrees or so, and just make a pass right down the edge of each one of these tapes. You're not going to affect the fabric at all because it was shrunk to 350 degrees, so this heat's not affecting our final shrink on the fabric. The one thing you do have to be careful of is if you start getting it too warm and you're a little slow going down the edge of this tape, these tapes will shrink and you're going to lose your nice straight taped edge. Basically it's finished and ready now. As soon as we finish all the ironing, be ready for the UV block filler coat. That's what we call our EcoFill, and has all the fire suppressant, all of the UV block, and it's a wonderful primer. Has extremely good adhesion to the fabric for the top coat to go over.